Welcome to tonight's presentation. My name is Ryan Eberhardt. I'm the president of the Westland Historical Commission. The Westland Historical Commission runs the Westland Historic Village Park. If you haven't been there, it is located on Wayne Road, south of Marquette. That if you come to the museum, you'll find a building dedicated to the history of Eloise. Jeff, Brenda in the back, and myself, we spent almost 6 years working on the Eloise Museum, and Jeff really spearheaded that project for us. When you came in tonight, there was some flyers on your chairs. One of them is a membership form for the Westland Historical Society. Please, if you want to help out at the museum, we would greatly appreciate you joining the society. We also have some upcoming events. On February 5th, we have a cleaning day indoors. We have a lot of rooms to clean. We have 7 buildings, and I think close to 50 rooms in each building, for the whole project to clean. So we could use all the help we can get. Also, the green flyer is our next lecture presented by Brenda Ozog, who's in the back. And this is our introduction to genealogy at the library. So if you're interested in that, we would like to see you there. So I've known Jeff for about 20 years. We had a couple classes together at Eastern as our undergrad, and then I think I pushed him to get his master's because I got mine first. Thanks very much. Yeah. But I've known Jeff really as a friend since 2009 when I joined the Historical Society. And then he talked me into becoming a commissioner in 2012, and I've been there ever since. He also talked me into becoming president of the Historical Commission. So I need to, really thank him a lot. Anyway, Jeff, in this room, Jeff is probably one of the most knowledgeable about the history of Eloise. He, again, spearheaded the project that started the Eloise Museum. He has done this presentation now. Tonight will be the second time, and it's very informative. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jeff, and there you go.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for all for attending today. The Westland Historic Commission, the Westland Historic Village Park, they do so much for the preservation of local history, and whether you are a Westland resident or not, your city likely has some sort of local history organization, and so something that is deep in my heart. I encourage you, whether it's the attending of an event or the sharing of a story, but small local historical organizations really thrive on that sort of thing. So anything that you can do to support either your local areas or Westland in general here, we absolutely encourage you to do it. Especially, when we get done today, if you visit Brenda over in the corner there, she's got the merch. She has the merch table. Two of the main sources that I'm going to be kind of pointing to here, the Images of America, Eloise book, and Annie's Ghosts, will be there. So if this taught you anything, if this helped you out, definitely, I hope you were to check that out. So, and give thanks to Ryan. I want to do my acknowledgments first and get that part kind of out of the way, because there are people that do need recognition for me personally. I'd like to thank Bethany Donovan for getting me involved. We worked together at Greenfield Village, and she encouraged me to join. And so, give thanks to her. With everybody at the commission, every members of the Historical Society, past and present, they truly put their heart and souls into the museum and all of these events. So thank you to all of them. For everything Eloise related here, we got to give special thanks to Mayor William Wild. He has been really a tireless supporter for the museum and for what we have done. When I was with the commission, we had meetings every couple of months, and he would say, "What do you guys need?" And we would tell him, and it might take some time, but we got it. And so, I appreciative of him, the members of the city council, to Richard LeBlanc and Glenn Anderson. Both of them were instrumental in bringing the artifacts from Eloise, from old displays that the eyes were not seeing them anymore, over to us on a very, very, very long-term loan. But some of the artifacts that you see over there, that I would encourage you to come and take a look at, and we can talk about them after we get done here. So. And then there's one other person I gotta thank, and maybe not for a reason they want. I'm gonna get into how this presentation came to be, and really how the museum itself came to be. When I was on the commission, the head of Parks and Rec at the time asked us to come to the summer celebration events that they would have and sit at a table and talk about your group and just encourage people to come to your place and all that. And so they asked Ryan, and Ryan said, sure. Ryan told me, I said, okay. And because this particular one was gonna be at the Jefferson Barnes Community Vitality Center, we said, can we bring our World War II stuff? So we did. We didn't really get a no, so that means we kinda got a yes. So we brought all of our World War II collection. We had it on a table about this length, a little bit wider than this. But we had a little space to fill, and so I asked Ryan, do you think we could bring some Eloise stuff? Because we're opening the museum in a few months. Let's bring some Eloise stuff out there, get people talking. And again, we asked everybody in the proper channels, and we didn't get a no, so that means we got a yes. So we bring the stuff, got it laid out on the table, and the Eloise stuff is really getting traction. The museum itself wasn't open yet. And so I'm kind of using this as my litmus test to decide what artifacts catch on, what really grabs attention, and maybe which ones don't. And so I'm kind of watching the general public. I'm watching them come through, and they're asking some good questions. We're telling them we're opening a museum, and they're getting excited for it. And we get people that are telling us all these stories that they have. They've got family members that used to live there. They've got family members that used to work there. All kinds of people that really feel passionate about this facility. And so I'm feeling pretty good. Okay, this is nice. This museum's gonna do really well when we get it open. So the event's going on. Ryan is off talking to some of the city officials, and I'm at the table, and I'll kind of situate myself to where I was. I'm at the table, and I'm watching people go by in my presenter pose with hands out in front of you, nice pose, relax. It's looking at people, hello, hi, welcome, kind of try to invite them to my table. And then I have this one person, this one lady, keeping in mind, this is the 75th anniversary of the Norwayne Housing District opening. I got this lady dressed as Rosie the Riveter. Okay. I don't think anything of it. As a man who plays vintage baseball and dresses in old clothing regularly, you can dress in whatever you want, I won't judge you. So she's over about here, about 20 feet from the table, and she's walking by, sees my table, and does a double take. She's walking. And just this look of shock on her face. And I'm, kind of prepared and waiting, and she looks at me and just looks at the table and goes, "What are you doing?" And I've, 3 million things go running through my head at this point. I'm like, okay. What is she looking at? Do we have something with a swastika on it? No, we don't have any of that in the collection, and we wouldn't have brought it even if we did. Okay, no Nazi stuff, no Japanese stuff. Okay. Is it me? Is there something on me? I'm looking around no, okay. Maybe she's super protective. That's the only thing I can think right now. She's super protective. And so I kind of explained, we're with the city's historical museum, and we brought our stuff to help you promote your event. And, we brought our World War II collection because, World War II, that's a big reason why you started. And, we figured we'd bring some of our Eloise artifacts too, because we're going to be promoting the opening of one of our exhibits in the spring. And that look of surprise and shock turned to confusion. Eloise, they did some things there. Now, I've heard this before, and so I'm prepared. I say, yes, they did do things there. And I'm talking about all the stuff with X-ray technology and how pioneering their X-ray techs were. Pioneering in kidney dialysis, kidney transplants, all the different kinds of work and music and occupational therapies. All these different, a working farm. It had all of the, yeah, absolutely. It had a lot of things there. And I don't know if it was dripping with sarcasm or just saturated with it, but I give her a nice smile, and that look of confusion disappeared and then turned to disgust. And she went, "They did a lot of other things there." And she started to walk away. And I said, "No, you're not getting away that easily." So I said, as a trained museum professional with 15 years experience and a master's degree in history, I'm really interested in primary source information and would love to know what other things Eloise did that you know so much about. No response. Kept walking, met a couple of other people, and is now at about here, kind of further away over there. And I at least say, if she walks away, fine. I said my piece. I defended something that I have been reading and researching about for, by this point, 6 years now. I feel like I've stated my case. So I go back to my table, getting ready. I'm keeping them kind of in the corner of my eye. They start to walk away. And as they start to walk away, she stops, turns back, and says, "Other things," and then walks away. And at that point I said, that is who I need to design this museum for. I need to design it for somebody who already has this preconceived notion of what Eloise was, so that way they can come in and find out what Eloise actually was. There may be some truth in some of the feelings that she had, but at the same time, there's also a lot of gaps that probably need to be filled in as well. And so I thank her for giving me the inspiration. I thank her for giving me the guidance on how to design this exhibit, as well as I thank her for the title of tonight's presentation, Other Things, and its role in medical history here. Again, my name is Jeff Koslowski. As Ryan kind of mentioned here, I was at one point I was the president of the Westland Historic Commission. I take pride in the fact that I would consider myself a curator for this, but it truly was, a village feeling to be able to move some of the objects in that we had to move some of the things that we had to do. Everybody pitched their weight, commission members, society members. A special thanks to John Grace over there, is one of our society members who got the Eloise fire truck functioning and operational for the first time in I don't know how many decades, but, and did all of that on his own spare time with a full-time job, with a family, and yet he was still there working on that truck and researching and reading about it. And so, it truly was like I said, a whole village atmosphere to do it. And so, with Eloise, there's a lot of different themes, a lot of different concepts that, for one presentation role would be very hard to fill, to tell every single element. So this is not going to be, the all-encompassing, all thorough presentation. This building opened on this day, and this building opened on this day, and that would bore me. Okay, I don't want to, tire you out with some of these things. I want to get into kind of the deep part of what Eloise was and how it kind of fit into American society. So, I want to first point you to this quote here. This quote comes from I would consider one of the better sources of material written about it. This is a book by Dr. Alvin C. Clark that was written in 1981-82 for the 150th anniversary of the opening of the facility. I actually have a copy over there. And this is literally page 1. Flip the cover, and this is what you see. The preamble to the bylaws of the Wayne County Board of County Institutions. So this idea of other things is really kind of blown away right out of the gate when you see that it says, the facility provides medical care to all citizens of the County of Wayne and emergency care to all persons without regard to race, creed, color, national origin, religion, sex, age handicap, or source of payment. That last one is going to be a recurring theme throughout the course of this. The idea of money, or really the lack thereof, and how that actually came to be and how that came to do something with this. I also want to point to national origin. If you were to go, and I encourage, if you have not already, most Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., the museum is open, and the commissioners will take you through. But you will see this. This is from the annual report in 1935. This is a breakdown of the essentially national origin of the patients within. So where they actually come from. So you get a really good idea of where they came from, who was there, who is represented. Obviously the United States is listed, but notice that it also has United States white and United States colored. As much as you'd say, product of its time, I find that interesting to note there. And then you can see kind of others. You see Poland is strongly represented, and as a Koslowski, oh, that brings joy to my heart. But it is just kind of a truly homogeneous mix of all of these different groups. In the social studies teaching field, we don't really call it the melting pot anymore. We call it the salad bowl, in that we are all together to form the salad, but you can separate pieces and they still retain their identity. And that truly is kind of what I think, Eloise is the salad bowl, but as the people leave, they form kind of their own identities from that as well. So this is on a big wall, something you'll be able to see, as you walk in and turn right. But it's a cool mixture, cool things to see there. So prior to Eloise, and when I say Eloise, I'm talking the facility on Michigan Avenue. The first kind of mentions of it actually go back to the Northwest Ordinance, which is a document written in the 1780s, 1790s, and it's basically the template for what Michigan should do and the other areas that form the Northwest Territory, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. How they should operate once they have achieved the elements of statehood. So in it you have kind of the laws for the care of the poor, how to take care of them, and that's where that second bullet point comes in. In the Northwest Ordinance, it says specifically that the poor are still entitled to house, so shelter, nurses, physicians, and surgeons. Okay, so nobody should be without medical care. The first one itself is established in 1832. It is a poorhouse initially. Poorhouse at its core. The asylum portion will be added later, but it is first and foremost, it is a poorhouse and goes through a whole slew of different names. The first reference that I have there is a reference to the road that it's on, the Fort Gratiot Road Poorhouse, the first county house, Wayne County Poorhouse, Wayne County Almshouse, Wayne County House. It's just lots of different, name roots, name origins, but if you hear any of them, know that it's referring to the same place. When they were deciding on the poorhouse, they'd also decided, and this all comes from Stan Keenan's book from 1913, which is the brown one right here. They said that not only do we want a poorhouse, but we also want a house of reformation, which in layman's terms is prison. So not only did they want Eloise to have, the soon-to-be structure that would be Eloise, not only did they want it to be a poorhouse, but they also wanted it to be a prison, but notice specifically the reference to reformation. And I think that gives a nice indication of what the facility was supposed to do. It was supposed to reform. It was supposed to help. And so I found that important that it should be included, that it was, that was originally to be included, but was eventually voted down. But who is to be welcomed in? Who is to be brought in? And this is straight in from here. Vagrants, vagabonds, the lewd, the idle or disorderly persons, stubborn servants, which the good ones, we don't want them, but the stubborn ones, bring them in. Common drunkards, common night walkers, which night walker does not mean zombies, right? This is for prostitutes, okay? So night walkers, pilferers, so people who steal, persons wanton and lascivious in speech. Wanton essentially means violent, lascivious means sexual. So anybody who walks up and down the street threatening to fight, threatening violence, or threatening something else, they would be looking at reformation here, there. Lascivious in speech, conduct, or behavior, common railers or brawlers. Railer is somebody who talks junk. A brawler is somebody who fights it. So all of these people was all listed as those that would be needing in a form of reformation there. The original location, the northwest corner of Gratiot and Mount Elliott. Right there. This is the Google map view of what it is. So we're on Gratiot looking northbound. Mount Elliott is the crossroad right here. And you see a little building right here of where it would be. And I was like, gee, I wonder what that building is. And then I got a little closer and I said, not for a poorhouse. Please don't let this be what is now on the land that was a poorhouse. Please don't let it be. Please don't let it be. Oh, it's a pawn shop. Oh, man. Oh. So that now is where, what used to be the original Wayne County poorhouse is now the site of a pawn shop. Great. So it's established here in 2 years. By 1834, the place was called uninhabitable. And the inmates, and they always called them inmates, the inmates were greatly neglected. 2 years. It took 2 years for this place to really need somebody or something to come in and change it. And that's where we bring this man in here, the Reverend Martin Cundig. Talk about, this man is the absolute personification of Christian charity. This guy did so much and was treated so poorly, and yet kept on coming back. He is the first superintendent of the poor. He's appointed in 1834, and he's appointed, and one of the first things that he does is he begins rescuing children from the Detroit cholera epidemic of the mid-1830s here. And I want to read a little snippet about who he is and what he did. So he, first of all, he buys a church. He removes pews and lets the church serve as essentially a makeshift field hospital. So he's bringing in kids and laying them here. It says he removed every other row of pews and converted the space into place for cots. One side of the improvised hospital was for the men, the other for the women. He secured a horse and light wagon and converted the latter into an ambulance with which he went around the city collecting the sick. Arriving at the hospital, he carried them in on his back and placed them on cots, and often the same day carried them out again dead. Placed them on his wagon again and gave them Christian burial. How is he rewarded? He has his stuff taken because he can't afford it anymore, and it is sold at public auction. He eventually he moves to Wisconsin, but his heart is always in the poor. His heart is always going towards that. So the state tried to give him some money. It was never enough. And again, there's that theme about money again. He was promised some, didn't get everything that he needed, and as a result, he ends up losing a lot of his property here. But this is a guy, like I said, he deserves a lot better than what he actually received there. So now it's on to leaving the city. We're leaving the site here. The Grass Road site is grossly overpopulated. Another theme that comes back with Eloise years later. There's approximately 100 people in there with 60 bedridden. The facility was supposed to handle maybe 24, and now it is holding 100. The intention was in 1838, we're going to sell the old site and use that money to buy a newer, bigger one. The superintendent at the time is a guy named Ammon Brown, and he proposes the site in Nankin Township that would eventually become what we know today as Eloise here. Keenan writes that the location he could offer was central, because this is a county facility, so it should be central within the county. It was central, it was convenient to the stage road, or as we know it, Michigan Avenue, and to the new railroad, which is the railroad that runs parallel to Michigan Avenue. But to the weightiest point of all was the low cost. So there's that money thing again there. There's a lot of references when they're talking about this new site, they're talking about it as a farm. And farm never was mentioned in the Gratiot Road site. The farm was only mentioned once he started to come out here, and if you know anything about Eloise, you know that there was a big farm on the other side of Michigan Avenue. So references to that farm go all the way back to 1838 too. Reverend Cundig, they asked him, his opinion, and he said, most of the people that are here are from Detroit. We shouldn't be doing this. It's going to cost way too much money to bring them from Detroit to this site. Why not just get a bigger site or renovate the one that we got now? And poor Reverend Cundig loses that argument too, and the new site is agreed to in Nankin Township. Like I said, he moves to Milwaukee, ends up dying in 1879, I think of heart disease. But we've got a new site. We've got a new facility. We're arriving in Nankin Township. We got it for $800, which people are kind of wondering, like, $800 seems like a pretty good deal considering the year before it sold for $3,000. And now Wayne County has bought it here for $800. And there's talk like, oh, the guy had a mortgage. He had a $700-something mortgage. They probably just said, we'll pay off all your mortgage. And he went, cha-ching, done, make it happen. So that's one of the rumors for that. One of the buildings that's included, and actually the first building on site, is one that was there before, called the Black Horse Tavern. After its purchase, the tavern is kind of converted into an office and living space for the keeper, part dining room, part dining area, until it's eventually torn down when the buildings begin to expand and grow. There's about 111 people in 1839. 35 said, sure, we'll go. 35, many of those that were in the Gratiot Road site were children, and homes were found for them. For the rest of them, though, they said they refused to travel into, as they called it, the awful wilderness. So that's how people in Detroit thought of Mencken Township. We were the awful wilderness here. It's during this time in late 1830s that we have our first attending doctor. $1 would get you basically an appointment, and if you needed medicine, there was an additional charge from there. But here becomes the kind of the first root elements of there being a hospital and medical facility there on site. So now let's get into what Eloise was and how it was compared to other places here. And what is mental health and how mental health was viewed elsewhere, not just here in Westland. In ancient history, references to mental illness were usually also connected to demons. And that if you had some sort of mental illness, in all likelihood it meant possession. And so references to mental illness are usually included with things like demonology, witchcraft, and exorcism. So all of those things are connected to one another. Mental health, AKA witchcraft in this sense here. What kinds of treatments could you expect to receive if you were in the 1700s and you had mental health issues? Well, the treatment you would receive include being run out of town. And the idea of get them away from me, I don't want to see it, complete and utter separation and disconnect, that's another thing that's going to be a recurring factor with Eloise throughout its time. Running people out of town, homelessness, taking their homes, taking their property, being locked in jail with gawking public buying tickets to look at you. Okay? Beatings, forced regurgitation, the idea that forced regurgitation would be what gets everything out of you, get those demons and possessions out of you. Shackles, to literally be shackled to the wall, although we'll talk about that moral treatment. We'll talk about that in just a minute here. And then societal rejection, which one could make the argument that mental health still does not receive the care and notoriety that it should. And so here we are, we're talking, this is the 1700s. This is more than 200 years ago, and societal rejection is coming up then, and I'm sure people would argue is still not looked at as having gone away here. Pennsylvania and Virginia are building hospitals specifically dedicated to mental health and mental health awareness. There's about 23 in 1844 that exist nationwide, and as we know, Eloise is even predates that, so Eloise was one of those 23. We also have our first organization dedicated to mental health here, the Association of Medical Superintendents of American Institutions for the Insane. So we finally have an organization dedicated to mental health where the experts in the field come together and try to organize something to go with it. We also start to see bigger names, probably the two biggest names nationally here, Benjamin Rush and Dorothea Dix, are working around here. Here's Benjamin Rush. A little bit on here, who's one of the pioneers of the moral treatment. And one of the first things he wants to do as part of the moral treatment is get rid of the shackles. Get rid of those things. Get the population out there. Let's get a greater level of acceptance here. Rush himself suggests providing work, suggests exercise, and suggests amusement, which are three things that Eloise had through most of the late 19th and into the early 20th century. So these are elements that Benjamin Rush has pushed forth, and Eloise has said, absolutely, we're on board. We're doing it here, or at least the Wayne County House, because we're not called Eloise yet, until now. So how do we get the name? And when I was working in the commission, you know, we bring the general public in, and the general public always likes to talk about how much they know, okay? And, you know, you get some people that, you know, you can't tell them anything new. You can't, even if I pull this most greatest and exciting fact, you can't tell them anything new, by golly. And so they would tell me how Eloise got its name. And they would say, ah, yes, Eloise, it was named after the first patient. And I'd say, oh, that's interesting. It's not, her name is Biddy, but okay, yeah, that's great. Or some people saying, yeah, Eloise, that was the first female doctor there. No, it wasn't that. And I'd say, and then I would get really excited and they'd say, there's a picture of a little girl with the dog. And I'd say, uh-huh. And they'd say, yeah, it was kind of silly. It was kind of an accident how the name came up. And I'd say, uh-huh. And they'd say, yeah, they named it after the dog. You were so close there. So how does the institution actually get its name here? It goes back to 1894. The facility is growing and growing. Their buildings are getting more and more. The sizes are getting taller and taller and taller. The population is increasing there. There's a lot more people getting mail, sending it and bringing it in. And the only way that you have access to the mail is in Wayne, which for us, Wayne is a 5-10 minute drive down Michigan Avenue. And let's just assume for the sake of this that the Wayne post office there on Michigan Ave, let's just say it's there. Okay, 5-10 minutes right down Michigan Avenue, depending upon what red lights you get hit at. And if you actually drive 35 right where it bends there, right by the church when you get into downtown Wayne. Okay. So, but for Eloise, for the grounds there, I mean, that's not an easy hike. There's a road. We know that there is a road, but you're not going 45 miles an hour, or 40, I'm sorry, 40. You're not going 40 miles an hour down the road there, okay? You're going like 5, maybe. If you've got a wagon, if you've got a cart or something like that. So it's several hours, to be able to get to Wayne, pick up everything, and be able to come back here. So the facility says what we need is a post office. But in order to get a post office, you can't just open it up. It's not like it's not like one of the businesses here in Westland. You have to go to the feds. You got to go to the federal government to get a post office. So they ask for one, and the federal government says, okay, give us a name. And we said, sure, Wayne County Poorhouse. And the federal government says, try again. And we go, okay. Let's send you a list. We'll give you a list of all of our potential options here. Wayne County Almshouse, Wayne County House, Wayne County Second House. They send that over, and the government looks at it, and they send it back. And they said, look, no, and one-word name only. And we go, all right. So we start looking through all of the popular, well-known superintendents. We send them a list of all the well-known superintendents. And the federal government shoots back, no. Okay, let's send every superintendent we've ever had. Let's send them that list. And the government says, no. And we said, fine. How about every superintendent's wife? And this is true. This is the progress here. Let's send every superintendent's wife's name. Send it on. The government says no. And so everybody's starting to get a little tired. They're starting to get a little frustrated here. And finally, one of the members of the governing board is talking about Freeman Dickerson. They're talking about the president of the governing board. And he refers to Freeman Dickerson's daughter, who is, as as Keenan refers to in here, a maid of four. I found that so sweet. A maid of four. But her name is Eloise. And so without telling Dickerson, they sent that name in. Dickerson didn't even know that his daughter's name was an option until the government said yes. So Eloise was kind of an accident. It was not on the major list here, but it became the facility. The post office is the first thing named, then the Michigan Central Railroad stop becomes the Eloise stop, then the telegraph office, then another train stop, until finally they just say, hey, I'd like to make a motion to just name everything after Eloise, because that's how everybody thinks of us. And nobody wants to upset Freeman Dickerson. You certainly don't want to upset his beautiful little girl. So motion passed, the whole place just becomes known as Eloise, to the point where Keenan says it will probably always remain as the official and geographical designation of this place. That's in 1913. Okay. In 1913, that's 109 years ago, he said this place will always be called that. And here we are in 2022, and we're still calling it that. And we're having a presentation here about it. Okay. The facility hasn't been open in 38 years, and yet we still call it that. So that's a little bit on that. This is kind of one of the original photographs of Eloise and her Saint Bernard. This is Eloise in later life as Eloise DeVuck. And this, if you come to the Westland Historic Village Park, this is the original painting that hung inside of D building. So little Eloise will greet you as soon as you walk in, just as she greeted everybody at D building when they came in the front entrance too. So let's talk about the facility. Let's talk about the grounds itself here. It's a very much a multifaceted complex. It's not, I don't want to say it's not unique, but there are other places that do have this. This map is from the Alvin C. Clark book, again, which if you want to come up afterwards and take a look at it. But among the things that at some point it had includes a hospital, which there were multiple hospitals on that, an asylum, a poorhouse, a farm, a sanitarium, a train station, a post office, at least one school, but there were multiple schools, a training facility for medical students, and housing for employees and their families. And I'm sure some of you may know somebody who at one point lived on or near the complex here. So, kind of looking at the structure here, and I'm going to pull up my laser. So here we are. Here's Michigan Avenue, straight across. What we know, what we kind of all-encompassing call Eloise was specifically then called D building. That's it right there. You also see this little number 40. Maybe you see it, maybe you don't. But that's the guard shack. That's right there. So there's that. And then you have some of the other buildings around. Number 25 is the powerhouse, which is located right behind it. So of all the buildings and structures, it's basically what you're seeing is right about here. So if you're driving down Michigan Avenue, you think, what a huge place this was. You're seeing maybe a quarter of it, right? Given the size of this, with other structures here, number 11 being Wayne County General, which has since been torn down. Number 12 is the Walter P. Reuther Long-Term Care Center. That's still there. Number 10 is N Building. This was a huge complex for those that were staying there. So you get a big sense there, not only of this map, but it comes in two parts because there's a south of Michigan Avenue side too that includes much of the farm down this way, as well as the cemetery, which is a little bit further down Henry Ruff when you get close to that point. But again, other places have facilities. Other cities have facilities like this as well. But not everybody does. So to have a facility of this scope and of this scale is pretty remarkable here. This is kind of the 1982 variant. This is the 1930 version. This is from a postcard, also from the Clark book. So this is 1930. D building would have just been finished and would have been right about there, right in here, because that would have been Seymour. So you can kind of get this view, from patient housing. A lot of the structures going on over here. So again, this is Michigan Avenue, Henry Ruff, Michigan Avenue, Merriman. Here's a lot of the asylum housing way off in the back here. So Wayne County General would have been over here. The Walter P. Reuther Center would have been over here. If you're familiar with the site now, this is right about where the Kroger is. So the Kroger and the strip mall are all over in this area now. But that is from the Clark book. Okay, let's talk x-rays. Because if there's anything that the facility is really known for, like as far as innovation goes, it's x-ray technology here. The first x-ray tech center, the first x-ray area is built at Eloise in December of 1896. And it is built by Stan Keenan, the author of this book, the bookkeeper of the facility, and amateur radiologist. Originally, his Xray machine, this is believe it or not, this is the modernized version of it. But it was originally hand-powered, and then finally he was able to talk them into getting an electric motor built. Till about 1900, Eloise did, from 1896 to 1900, Eloise did all of the X-rays for the entire city of Detroit. Their patients would be brought here to Eloise, they would get X-rayed, and they would send them back. So this is a trusted X-ray machine. How do we know it's trusted? Well, as legend has it, here's how we know the first X-ray was successful. So a patient comes in, says, my foot hurts. It's really hurting me. And they say, well, does it hurt when you do this? And it hurt when you do this? Okay, hey Keenan, try out your new X-ray machine on him. So they take him, they take his foot, they take an X-ray of his foot, and they take a look at it, and they notice something on the X-ray. They notice something that's kind of different. And they look at it and they say, hey, did you ever have any accidents? Or anything ever got into your foot, maybe? And he went, oh, I got shot. And the X-ray had revealed that he actually had bullet shrapnel in his foot. And I don't know if that's the first, but that's just one of the cute little legend stories. But Eloise's X-ray machine, and one of the things we always like to try to preach with it there, is that in all likelihood, Eloise was one of, if not the first, medical facility to take an X-ray for diagnostic purposes in the United States. I mean, when you think about just X-rays like standard procedure, I mean, you go to a hospital and you sneeze, they go, chest X-ray. You just stretch a little bit, and it's like, lower lumbar X-ray. It's such a part of the medical experience, and yet it was kind of pioneered here. I mean, X-rays exist. There's pictures of Tesla and Edison taking pictures of themselves and all this, but as a hospital to diagnose something, Eloise, if we weren't the first, we were very, very early on in 1896, in the United States for sure. Funny little side note, Keenan used to actually play tricks on people using this. He would have people sit in the chair, and then he would wire the chair to the point where they would sit down, and then he'd flip a switch and it would zap them. He takes all kinds of hilarious pride in that, of doing that to people here. The superintendents would bring out friends from Detroit to see the institution and invite them into the laboratory during the evening to see the X-rays and different experiments made famous through the classical investigations of Tesla. Hidden wires were arranged around the laboratory in convenient places known only to the writer, Keenan, because he built the thing, the doctors and the superintendents. Once a visitor entered the room, he was doomed for a scare. While quietly sitting on an innocent-looking chair and talking to one of the superintendents, he would suddenly experience a sensation in the region of the seat quite different to what he had been accustomed. So yeah, imagine being somebody, and this is the new fantastic X-ray machine. Yeah, let's try it out on you. So anyway, on to one of the other things that Eloise was pioneered for was tuberculosis and its treatment of it. Treatments go back to the 1880s. That's the earliest that we know that they had been treating for it. They asked, or at least the governing board asked in 1902 for the erection of a canvas hospital for the treatment of indigent and pauper consumptive cases. Consumption, one of the terms for tuberculosis there. In 1903, there are indeed 2 tents built, one for men, one for women, 24 patients total. They are separated from the grounds, and they're men and women separated from one another. I don't want to say they're having success, but they at least feel like they need to do more, and so the Eloise Sanatorium is built. The presiding doctor, the president at the time, Paul Dulitz, said, "The treatment of patients is in accordance with that of other recognized hospitals," which you'd think, well, it should be. It's a hospital. But remember, Eloise is a poorhouse. And the fact that they have a medical facility that is good enough to be on par with other hospitals in the region, this is a big deal. But because it's a poorhouse, the people that are coming into Eloise don't have money, or they don't have money anymore. Many of the people that are coming in have already been treated, they've already gone to other places, and they've just ran out of money. And the hospital said, "You don't have any money? We're not treating you anymore. Out you go. Discharge them." And so these people would be brought with their tuberculosis not fixed, not cured, and they would be brought to Eloise to be cared for there. So I did a little research and I did some digging, because this was always something that intrigued me, this idea that people would be basically kicked out of a hospital and they would come here and Eloise would treat them. They would treat them for as long as they could. And I thought, well, they're brought in the last stages. So about how long would they be? And so I went through a big binder of death certificates, which the Westland Historic Village Park has copies of death certificates from 1918, 1919, 1920, a lot more years too. But I picked 1918 because that was kind of the peak, or one of the peak years of tuberculosis. And so in looking at these death certificates, I counted how many people died of tuberculosis, and I got 91. 91 people in this time period died of tuberculosis. The numbers on the left represent the number of days from the time of their admittance to the time of their death on their death certificate. As a statistics guy, I took the highest number and the lowest number and subtracted them. So one person lived 653 days. One person, actually 2 people, lived less than half a day. Everything else, you see your numbers from 11 days, 649, 412, 9, 3, and eventually I arrived at the average of 73.5. And so in 1918, when tuberculosis was really running rampant through southeast Michigan, people that were brought to Eloise with TB lived about 2 months. That was its time. And then it's kind of brutal to see, and yet at the same time, like, it really gives credence to what Eloise was trying to do. It was always tried to help, even with money not being an option. Like, I feel like when people get into the medical field, that's why they do it. They do it because they genuinely want to help people. And so to see them doing that really it's refreshing the more that you read about it. It's closed in 1923. The state hospitals and Detroit hospitals are improving, and so the patients were not coming in as much. And so with other expansion going on, the buildings were torn down in 1936, which we'll see them in just a second here. This is an example of one of the death certificates here. I've blocked out the person's name, but there are hundreds of these at the Westland Historic Village Park. And you can kind of see right there, let me bring my laser back up. There it is, pulmonary tuberculosis. So that listed as the cause of death. The other thing I want to point out while we're looking at this is where my red arrows are pointed, in that Eloise is listed as the town or listed as the village, especially this one on the right here, where it's listed as Eloise, Michigan. And so when the conversation about Eloise was its own city, like, they're not kidding. They think of themselves as their own city, and a lot of the documentation does also. I wanted to go on with what Dr. Dulitz said here, where he says, we are confronted with conditions at Eloise unknown in most hospitals. We receive patients in the last stage of consumption, sent to us when their personal funds are exhausted, when friends have wearied of their care, when nothing is left but the poorhouse. There is a class of patients that is sent to us when death, as a general thing, is staring them in the face and all hope of recovery have passed away. It's, you're looking at it 100 years later, and you still got to feel for not only for the patients, but for the workers as well, like knowing that the people that are coming in, like these people that are coming in are, like, they're not going to make it. Like, how do you go on? How do you do that? That says a lot to them and who they are. A few pictures. These are pictures from the collection. These are all public availability, so you can come into the museum and say, I'd like to look at Eloise pictures, please. And one of the commissioners will pull out binder after binder after binder after binder and show you some of these things, like the outdoor seating, one of the outdoor bedding areas, the dining room, back view of the more permanent tuberculosis building. These are all, so this structure is up. So this picture is pre-1936. The other side of the outdoor building here with patients, you can see in bed there. Another back view of the tuberculosis building, another back view with the roads here. And the making of the food. Tuberculosis treatment is pretty, I don't want to say ramshackle, but there was still a lot to be learned about it. And so a lot of people are trying lots of different things, trying to be innovative with it. But the generally agreed upon way to treat tuberculosis was fresh air. That's why most of the buildings you saw had a lot of windows and open space, sunlight, fresh milk, and a clean, soft diet. Well, that's why I wanted to put this picture of the kitchen. One of the people that's kind of connected with tuberculosis treatment is a man by the name of Dr. John Kellogg. And so our Kellogg's Corn Flakes was actually originally developed as a tuberculosis dietary supplement and has since caught on since then. Now, other things that Eloise is kind of pioneering with is here in 1937, the introduction of music therapy. Dr. Ira Altschuler, that's him in the middle right here, he puts together the first music therapy program in the United States. He puts it together at Eloise and is really catching on. It's really doing good things there. Michigan State becomes one of the first colleges and universities to actually develop a college program, and they facilitate their students at Eloise. Patients and staff often gave performances. There's photographs in the collection of the performers on stage, a lot of like nurses in particular areas that all get together for a song. And so, not only do I want to, kind of showcase how important music therapy is, but I wanted to kind of pull this up here as a quick little 3-minute video about what music therapy still means, still to this day, almost 90 years later.
Hi, I'm Cundig, or you can call me KJ for short. I have cerebral palsy and psychosis. I struggle to correct the false realities of my illness. Before music therapy, there was a lot of struggle, a lot of things I didn't understand. I had puzzling thoughts. And when I concentrated too much, those thoughts turned into nightmares. When I met Tony and started music therapy, it was like I jumped into deep water and started swimming.
What's our thing? You had an idea.
Okay, my idea is something jazzy.
Jazzy. Okay. Do we want like happy jazzy?
Happy jazz sounds good, yeah. Stargazing in the moonlight, people dancing in the strobe lights, birds flying in the springtime, everybody's happy, everybody's dancing. Because love lights the sky. With Tony's help, music therapy helped me to heal. Music takes me on a journey where I feel safe, and I can express myself freely and openly without judgment from human eyes. I am free to be myself and not what anyone else wants me to be. In the music I create, I hope to pass the same effect that music had on me to someone else. I love music. Music is my world.
So I don't know if that touches your heart like it touches mine, but I mean, this is something that prior to 1937, people would have looked at this poor kid and said, "Can't do nothing for you, kid, sorry." And yet now with music therapy that Dr. Altshuler pioneered at Eloise, a lot of kids are able to do something with themselves, and a lot of kids are able to get back in there. There we go. Kids are able to express themselves and show an artistic beauty that kind of lies within. Altshuler once said when talking about group therapy, which music therapy kind of falls under, he said, Dr. Altshuler said, the daily sessions not only disperse gloom and monotony, but they also destroy the ghastly habit of inertia so prevalent in hospital wards. Inertia which tends to wither the few social threads saved during the psychotic process. And so this group therapy idea, this group therapy concept, when people see how music therapy and how the patients respond to it, there's a patient there on the left playing the harp, and they say, well, if we can do it with music, why not try it with something else? Why not television? Could television be a form of therapy? And that's where we get pictures like you see on the right here. This is not just a group of patients sitting around watching TV. This is a study session. This is doctors trying to determine how certain forms of television affect certain people. It's just like in the music realm, where if you listen to certain music, like when you're going to go exercise, like when I go running, believe it or not, when I go running, I want music that's going to fire me up and makes me feel like I can run forever. And then there are times where I just need a good cry I don't put on Metallica when I need a good cry. I need some kind of music that's going to kind of put me in the mood. And it's Dr. Altshuler who is saying, we can harness this, we can use this. And that's something that they're trying here at Eloise. Other means of assistance, in 1887, the shackles are gone. Chains are gone, dim cells are gone. This was all meant to isolate. They said, get them out here. We need the insane. We need them to become more with the group here. And they're doing this before a lot of other places have gotten rid of their chains and shackles too. So Eloise is kind of going forward with that. Tobacco growth. Okay, so we can do it with music, we can do it with television. Could we do it with tobacco? At the end, I encourage you, over on the table here, you will see a pack of cigarettes. Don't touch them. You'll see a pack of cigarettes that were actually on the label will say Eloise, Michigan, and that they were actually cured and grown by the people there. There's a plan, we don't know if any of it was ever acted upon or not, but in 1939, one person put forward the idea that could we cure cancer with hibernation? The idea of going into a deep sleep to be able to, however that would work, beyond my pay grade. We don't know if it was ever attempted, likely not, but that's one of the things that is being thought about. Dr. Erickson in 1942 at Eloise is brought in specifically to try hypnotherapy. Can hypnosis work? They're trying everything that they can. Even same thing in 1942. They hire their first psychologist, one of only 6 hospitals of its kind in the country to have a full-time psychologist on staff. So they're trying. They are trying. The other thing that method of rehabilitation that they're trying is the farm. Farming operations, I mentioned, the references go back to the 1830s. The one here at Eloise here had everything from a piggery to a hennery to a blacksmith, horse barns, tobacco barn, and a 100-cow dairy barn. That's where that big milk jug came from that says Eloise Dairy on the front of it. That was from the facility here. They built a cannery in 1939, processes about 65 tons of food per month, most of which, in fact, all of which was consumed on site. But it is not long for the complex here. In 1955, it's closed. It was almost always operating at a loss. And just to put it in perspective there, in 1945, it loses $23,000 right there. I mean, I don't want to propose a number of what that means in today's dollars, but $23,000 is not something to sneeze at today, let alone 1945 there. So the therapeutic purposes really could not justify the cost here. When it was operational, it really was doing quite a service here. That is I put this picture in even though I brought the trophy is over on that table there, but I bring this in because this was the first digitized artifact that we did within the collection here. It was, that's my left hand and my old cell phone that's taking it. And so when we were sending pictures to the design company for the exhibits, I said, we got trophies, here's one. And they said, can you get us a better picture? Sure. So I like this picture. Don't make fun of me. All right. Now, on to something a little more serious here. And the next few are kind of in this way. It's about shock therapy and shock treatments. There are essentially 2 shock therapies that are introduced in the 30s going into the 40s here. There's insulin shock and electroshock. We're looking first at insulin shock here. There's a lot of hope behind it at first. It's easy for us today to go introducing an excessive amount of insulin into the body. That sounds borderline dangerous. And the truth is, it is borderline dangerous. That's why they stopped doing it. But at the time, it was thought of to be this remarkable new treatment here, but was eventually continued to being what they called labor intensive, in that you needed an Eloise employee there around the clock to make sure that the person could indeed come out of it here. But in 1937, they're saying the presence in Manhattan of a young Vienna psychiatrist who cures such disoriented wits created by means of insulin created great stir among doctors, great hopes among relatives of schizophrenics, from Time magazine in 1937. I want to make sure that schizophrenia gets included in there. Schizophrenia is first diagnosed in 1911, and what that ends up doing is it gives doctors essentially carte blanche to say, we have something now, you have something now, and they diagnose it, and where the person goes from there and say, it's schizophrenia, it's mental health, we can't help you here, try the asylum. And you see the numbers of patients coming into Eloise with schizophrenia is just increasing year after year after year after year. So the diagnosis exists, but what we don't have is a way to fix it. And so that's why you have music therapy, work therapy, television therapy, insulin shock. You have all these different kinds of ideas that are tried because the numbers are starting to get out of control. There's starting to be way too many patients that are coming in, more than what the facility can handle. 1948, you have 74 patients receiving treatment, 58 the year after that. Electric shock is, the numbers, as you can see, are actually far higher. Electric shock therapy is actually still in use in certain places. Obviously refined a little bit more, but it was used at compared to insulin shock, the side effects were less, and it was far cheaper to administer. But still high cost on the patient, not enough long-term success with that. I have down the bottom there about schizophrenia, and it is so hopeless that anything that holds out hope should be tried. Right? But that's not the only quotes that I found from it. Now, one of the sources that we used here is a book called Annie's Ghosts, which, Brenda, you have copies of that back there, right? All right. So if you have not read Annie's Ghosts, your homework tonight is to go to Brenda, buy 2 books, just in case the first one, something happens to it, you got a backup. To make sure you, it's available at Westland Public Library too, but God, you'd make us feel so much better if you bought it. But that is like mandatory reading for anybody who A, is interested in Eloise, B, has ever had an interest in genealogy. That is an excellent source. But one of the things that the author, Steve Luxenberg, does is he interviews a man named Edward Miscavige, who worked at Eloise at the time. He said, I was so glad when the insulin shock, I was so glad when it was over. It was physically demanding for the staff as well as the patients. Panic would not be too strong a word for what I felt until they finally came out of it, they being the patient that was having it. So even for the employees, it was misery. But how about people that actually had it? The 2 bottom quotes there, electric shock is physical torture of an extreme type. The fear is intensely physical. Okay, and then Sylvia Plath down at the bottom there, with each flash, a great jolt drubbed me till I thought my bones would break and the sap fly out of me like a split plant. I wondered what terrible thing it was that I had done. So, clearly negative results, ultimately why they were discontinued. But again, Eloise, they did it, trying to find a solution. They're trying to find a cure for schizophrenia, trying to do everything in their power to be able to reduce the number of patients and ultimately try to find some good. Speaking of controversy, let's talk lobotomies. Okay, so first I want to look at it kind of nationally before I talk about what Eloise did and what I found out with it. When we think of lobotomies, usually the idea that comes to mind is something like this. Okay, this is from the movie itself, but it's not a terribly incorrect way when you're looking at the tools. A lobotomy is pretty simply a long metal rod and a hammer. And just to kind of give it to you, yeah, it's the movie, but yeah, here's the real version of it. That is Dr. Walter Freeman, or as his daughter once called him, the Henry Ford of lobotomies. Which, I don't know if I'd necessarily wear that one as a badge of honor, but he did, from the accounts. He actually liked the nickname, the Henry Ford of lobotomies. He himself, in 1949, performed 5,000 lobotomies in 1949 alone. The same year that Antonio Igaz Moniz wins the Nobel Prize in Medicine for his pioneering work in the lobotomy procedure. So Freeman saying, he's saying he did 3,000, total. This other source I read says 5,000 in 1 year. Who does what? How much is which? It's really hard to project it here. He looks at Freeman does. He looks at this procedures like it's kind of his legacy, but at the same time, this can do some good. There's one source that says that Freeman was asked, like, how can you do this? Like, how can you do this procedure? And he kind of looks at him and goes, do you have a better idea? Because if you do, I'd like to hear it. And it's so hard to pick out, like, is that sarcasm? Like, is he saying, like, do you think you can do any better? Well, good luck. Is it like that, or is it a, look, do you have something? I'm willing to hear it if you have it. It's so hard to get the context for it. But Freeman does lobotomies all the way up through 1967. So lobotomies are out there. They exist. Did Eloise do them? They did. Right there. Prefrontal bilateral lobotomy. So going back to Annie's ghost, then the premise, the author is trying to find out information about his aunt. And as he's looking, he's hearing about all these different types of therapies, and he hears about lobotomies, and so he asks Edward Miscavige again, he asks him, do you think Annie would have had a lobotomy? And Edward says, probably not, no. And he goes on to say, we did them for about 3 or 4 years. Too many bad results, patients urinating on themselves, no evidence of improvements in their illness. We didn't do many, and we abandoned it pretty quickly. Now, I see that and I go, okay, they tried it, it didn't work. It's unfortunate for those that went through it. I mean, I hate having to have a medical procedure that doesn't work and you're still hurting. When he says we didn't do that many of them, what does that really mean, though? And so I started, I kind of thought back, anytime somebody talks about other things, what are they referring to? Is it the lobotomy? That's probably the worst of the worst if they're referring to anything there. So when when they're talking about this and he says, we didn't do many of them, people are telling me like, oh yeah, they did lobotomies there. Oh yeah, they did lobotomies there. And then I talk to others and they're like, they want nothing to do with it. Don't talk about it, don't say anything about it. And so we at the commission, we ran into this kind of tough situation. Like, what do we do? Because we have some really important people that are saying, don't talk about it. And we've got a general public that's saying, please talk about it. And here we are in the middle going, I don't know what to say. What do we do? And so we kind of framed it as this. They didn't do many. They abandoned it pretty quickly. Okay, fine. But yesterday, I kind of said, we have the records of the operating room at Seymour Hospital, C building, right next to D building. That's the big wide books that are over there. Those are the surgical records. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to try to find them. I'm going to try to find these lobotomies. So that's a picture straight from those books. There's 2 procedures, 2 lobotomies that are done right on that day. And so I went looking and just looking. I eventually found like some trends. I'm noticing that the same doctor keeps doing lobotomies. So he's the head guy. I mean, literally and figuratively. He's the head guy. No pun was not intended, but I'll take it. But he does other procedures too. He's doing other types of works. He's doing other kinds of procedures. So he's not just the lobotomy guy. He does everything with the brain and skull. So I see him, and every time I see him, I look over, and is it a lobotomy? Yes. Write it down in my notepad here, and if it's not, move on. I found what I would consider the earliest one done, and I found what I would consider the latest one done. And so I put it all together. I said, okay, here's how we're kind of rolling with this here. Okay. The earliest lobotomy was done on May 24th, 1950. The last lobotomy was done on February 7th, 1952. That is 625 days between lobotomy 1 and lobotomy last, right? And so I'm pouring through these. I went all the way through 1952, couldn't find any more. Went, 5 months in early 1950, didn't see any there. So maybe there were some done in 1947, 48, 49. If there were, I didn't find them. Maybe another time, but not yet. So between May 24th, 1950 and February 7th, 1952, between the first one and the last one, Eloise did a total of 30 lobotomies in 625 days. So the spreadsheet mind in me says, what does that break down to? And what that breaks down to is 1 lobotomy every 3 weeks for 625 days. Okay, now the next thing is, how often was it done compared to other procedures there? Now, using a mathematical formula of count 5 pages, do the average, and just assume that's the way it is for the rest of it. The total number of procedures between those 2 dates is 8,304. 8,304 total procedures were done between the first lobotomy and the last one. Meaning, of all of the procedures, lobotomies account for 0.4% of all procedures done at Eloise. You look like the kind of crowd I can share this with. There were more circumcisions during that time. Okay? So there were more circumcisions, and there were just as much of references to, like, bullet wounds. Okay, so there's a lot of other things rolling around in here, and so when I hear people say, "Oh, they did lobotomies there," like, they did a lot of other things there too. So I wanted to kind of put that in there. But the last thing about lobotomies here, before I begin to wrap it up here, is that one of the trends that I read was that lobotomies seem to be more on women than men. And I said, I don't know about that. Let's find out. So I looked at the records, and of those 30 lobotomies, women accounted for 25 of them. So I don't know if that is a statement on was the lobotomy seen as a possible option? Is it a gender power thing? Not really sure, but it's telling that Eloise kind of fits into kind of this national model for gender work as well. Kind of in the wrapping it up here, go to the tail end here. Kidney work, we mentioned that Eloise is pioneering in kidney dialysis here. The first kidney dialysis in the state of Michigan happened at Eloise, and the second kidney transplant takes place at Wayne County General, or O building, within the complex there. The tunnels, I would not be doing my job here if I didn't at least mention the tunnels. The first thing I will tell about the tunnels is don't go in the tunnels, or don't go in there anymore. Okay, nobody's looking at each other, okay. There's essentially a main tunnel connection here between the psychiatric complex N building, which is kind of the bigger one in the back, Wayne County General, which was O building next to it, and the Ruther Long-Term Care Facility, which is P building. So that's where, like, people talking about the tunnels, those are the tunnels, okay? That's what they're talking about there. Their purpose, heat, water, and sewage. Could it be used as a walkway? Sure, if the Rouge floods, yeah, it could be used. But its main purpose was, like I said, heat, water, and sewage reasons here. And it's also not uncommon. A lot of places with major complex have tunnel systems as well. Other references to occupational therapy here, these are all from our collection as well with displays. These are original pot holders that were made by patients here. Here's our wicker chairs that are being sewn and made there. And then getting into the closing. So getting back to the money. Okay, funding was never where it was supposed to be. Looking at the 1930s, I pulled these numbers up here too. The patients were supposed to receive, on average, $1.06 per day. The state gives 95 cents, which doesn't seem like a lot initially until you hear the famous number that Eloise had at one point 11,000 patients at once. And so you take that $1.06, multiply it by 11,000, that gets you $11,660 the state owes the facility per day, when in reality they're receiving $10,450, a difference of $1,210, or 1,142 people. About 10% of the population was not getting the funding from the state that they were being promised. Take that number, take that $1,210 that they weren't getting, multiply that by 365 days, and in 1 year, the state was not paying $441,650. This is not new either. This is something that keeps coming and keeps coming back. Alvin C. Clark, who writes, the 1982 history on the facility, every so often he throws a little subtle shot, throws a little shade, as my students would call it, throws a little shade at the state, where he says, always a state responsibility under the law, and you could just feel the teeth being gritted as he's writing, always a state responsibility under the law. The county filled a void existing for county residents when the state failed to provide institutional treatment for this unfortunate segment of the population. So they're saying the county was the one that's filling in, but the state owed us a lot there. And so as the 60s roll on, you start to see Social Security shifting in, Medicare and Medicaid coming in under the Johnson administration. That starts to come in, eventually leading to the facility's closing in 1984. Now, what can you do? How do we take it forward from here? Well, after you buy multiple copies of Brenda's books over there, and then take whatever other money you have left in your wallets and drop it into the donation bin. We encourage you, if you haven't done so already, every Saturday between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. to come to the Westland Historic Village Park. It's located on Wayne Road, on the west side of Wayne Road between Marquette and Cherry Hill. Ryan mentioned the events that are there and that are prevalent here. The materials from Eloise are all, we're on 49-year loan. I think we're down to 43 by the time that we've got everything going here. But it was something that had always been talked about. We we're doing this event, and then we're going to get to Eloise, and then we're going to get to Eloise. And so when we finally mentioned it to Mayor Wild, that's when they said, okay, we can do something. Let's restore this building, the row house. Let's restore the row house, and let's make that the new home. Because we didn't have enough artifacts to make it a home, but we had enough to make it an Eloise museum. And that's why we chose to go the direction that we did. We opened in May of 2018. Former employees have come in, family members, anyone that felt that they had a connection to it, wanted to share a story. They've been through, and some of the stories make you smile, and some of the stories make you hold your head in your hands. But it's absolutely been a wonderful experience of mine to be working on this process from cradle to grave here, and really to be able to show that this is indeed, Eloise itself is truly more than just simply other things. So if you were to go to it, one of the things from the movie, if you look and you'll see there's this little model here. That's one of the props. That is there. So you can actually come see us. And it's a really good model, for what it's worth. It's a good model. There's a few little errors, but not enough to hate on them for it. So that will do it here. Here's my bibliography, just in case you think I made anything up. Here's my sources here, and I believe I brought them all. So if you if you want to take pictures of it or see the books while they're here, some of them are available for purchase. So hopefully this, if you already had a fire lit, hopefully it stoked it a little bit more. If you were here because some family member dragged you to it, hopefully I sparked something. But at this point, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your patience for this. And at this point, if you had any questions, I'm happy to field it. And if you don't have questions, then thank you for coming out. Thank you for supporting local history. And I hope you have a safe travels and a safe ride home. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Jeff?
Jeff, you mentioned that the funding was consistently low throughout the history of Eloise, to thousands and thousands of dollars consistently. What do you find about how they would make up for that loss? Was that lower staffing, or is there any of how they would handle those losses year after year?
It's a good question. How with the facility constantly operating at a loss, how is the facility able to keep going? It's a combination of things. You see a really dedicated staff. You see a very loving and caring staff. I mean, to be able to, here we are 38 years later, and, I have people still, anytime they hear about Eloise, they think, wow, it was such a cool place, and, what it does and what it did for people. Every time I do either this presentation or talk about it, I don't know if she's here or not, but there's always somebody who pulls out their birth certificate and says, look, I was born here. I mean, I don't carry around my birth certificate to say, look, I was born at Oakwood Hospital in Dearborn. Like, I don't care. but the fact that, it elicits that kind of emotion, like, you really get that small town kind of sense, like everybody knows each other, they work with each other, they're kind of all in this together. And I've felt that, being part of this group, being part of the Westland Historic Commission, that, we're doing this because we love it. And so I think there's some sense in that. The drier, more boring answer is, yeah, they would cut staffing a little bit, or yeah, they would discharge patients, when they had to. But I attribute it more like, sorry, we can't afford to pay you that much, or as much, or get you the raises, and they'd say, all right, well, here we are. So.
Earlier in your presentation, you mentioned $23,000 was lost by the farm in 45?
Yeah.
That roughly translates to $450,000 today.
Okay, there we go. So we're talking about, a farm that's losing today's equivalent more than $500,000, and it'd be very hard for somebody, for budgetary reasons, especially those who aren't, as we like to say, the boots on the ground. For those who are not, the person that are seeing the effects that it has, the positive effects that these therapy programs, these things are doing, it's very hard to convince somebody who's not seeing that to say, look, okay, we lost about $500,000 last year, but if you would see the way that this person got better, it's so hard, especially to convince him or her and taxpayers. Like, it's unfortunate. And being a teacher, like, I see those kinds of things, but sometimes money talks.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, I would like to point out that all donations that were given for this event by you goes to the operations of the village. None of the workers, none of the volunteers, none of the commissioners, society members, none of us get paid. We do this because we love history, we love the history of Westland, Eloise. We want to give back to the community, and you guys help us do that by bettering the museum. So I would like to thank you for your donations and your purchases in our makeshift gift shop. All purchases, all the money for that goes right back into the gift shop. We don't take any of that money either. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming
I
out.
got a question.
Who would I speak to regarding loaning artifacts? Donating my artifacts?
I'll talk to you after. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, everybody.